Hello and welcome to the Genius Podcast. My name is Karen Doyle, your host and founder of the Genius Project, an initiative for Catholic women designed to support and resource you towards growth in all areas of life, spiritual, personal, and professional. We seek to do this through the Catholic Women's MasterClass, our online courses, our live virtual Catholic women's events, and the Genius Podcast, which you're listening to. If you're interested in finding out anything about these initiatives, please visit our website at www.geniusproject.co, or you can come and join us on Instagram, genius_project_daily, or you can also subscribe to the Genius Project YouTube channel. On this week's episode of the Genius Podcast, I am joined by Bridget Sakr. Bridget shares a very powerful story about the role that her faith played in preparing her to be able to forgive somebody who took the life of her child. Just a disclaimer that this episode does discuss the death of a child and grief and loss, and so just to prepare you for that in this episode. This is an incredibly sacred conversation in which Bridget really shares quite vulnerably about her experience of tragedy, of losing her daughter Veronique, and how she was actually able to forgive the drunk driver who took the life of her child. And now what she is actually doing to channel that grief and to offer, her suffering as a gift to those around her. I really hope and pray that you are blessed by this conversation. Well, Bridget, welcome to the Genius Podcast. It's such a gift and a joy to have you joining us today. You're based in Sydney and I'm in Canberra in Australia, but welcome.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Oh, look, it's so wonderful. You recently came down to Canberra when we were filming the Shalom World series called Real Women, and you and Von and I had a couple of hours in the studio together. We did our interview for the TV show, but golly goodness, just being in your presence, Von and I were just so moved, and the conversation after was really sacred. And so it's just beautiful to have you joining us on the podcast to have a similar conversation around, the role of forgiveness, because that's been a big journey for you. But before we jump into that, would you just give the listeners a little bit of background as to who you are and what you do?
Sure. Look, born and bred in Sydney, and, like every other person, went to school, went to uni, and after uni, into the corporate world for, 35 years of my life. And, very much in all my life, everything I've done has had to have a purpose. I just never got out of bed and thought I was going to a job. It had to have a purpose, had to have meaning. So in the corporate world, my purpose was to help people into home ownership. And then, in life, we have pathways and we have plans, we have goals, and, absolutely people should have those. But, we never, ever know what's going to happen. And the story of the tragedy that occurred to me and my family, whereby, Veronique, my daughter, and her cousins, obviously, were having a great time together and went for a walk to get some ice cream. And, 7 children were tragically killed 3 years ago in February. 4 of the children obviously killed, and Veronique being one of them, and one of them, suffering from, severe brain injuries, and the other 2 obviously, live every day of their life, which we can't forget, the children that are survivors or the siblings. And from there, I've, continued through life, journeying without my daughter, with my son, who's 16 now, Michael, and my husband, Craig. And it's always been about the purpose. What is the purpose? What is my purpose? And since then, I've started a charity called Heartfelt, which is an online platform helping people through their grief. And also we've opened a cafe called Carta Cafe, which is 4 in French for the 4 children, honouring them, and also in particular my daughter, who loved cooking and feeding people. And the beauty about the cafe, it's a community cafe in Strathfield to give back to the community, and people can come into the cafe and they can bring a photo of their loved one. And we've got a Polaroid camera. We take a photo of them and put up on the wall, because love lives on. Just because you love someone, just because someone died, you don't stop loving them. And what we're going to do with the proceeds of the cafe is actually give it to Santa Sabina, the school that my daughter went to, for a scholarship for a girl from year 10, 11 and 12. So we'll start next year. And Veronique would have been year 10. So it's about giving somebody else the opportunity to go to the same school that she went to, who can't afford to go to that school, and we want to give back. And if I can give back, we can give back as a family to the community, to the school that Veronique went to another family, to feel that the love and the privilege of being in a school. So that's kind of a little bit about myself. I'm married. I've got Michael, who I invest a lot of time and energy into, because he needs to feel like he's worth living for. We sold our corporate business, the lending business I was in, but I'm still there for a couple of days a week, doing what I do best, and that is connecting people, nurturing relationships. And so I'm I do a bit of finance. I do a bit of, coming into the cafe, talking to people. That's what I love doing, and helping people in grief, which is key to my heart. And the only way I was able to do that is obviously, taking that path of forgiveness and, doing God's great work that he wants me to do.
Yeah, Bridget,
I think I meandered a little bit, but I mean, it's kind of in a nutshell.
That's a nutshell, and we can unpack that over the next 30 minutes together, because there's so many things in that conversation that are real gifts for people. And I think what you've done is absolutely extraordinary. I just really want to honor you and Layla and Danny as well, because the journey has not been easy, but for some reason, and we can get to this later on, but you said that perhaps you were chosen for this, to carry this cross, because you would bear witness to other people.
Yeah.
And you would be the way to navigate forgiveness and to navigate grief in a way that's united with Christ. And we do know that in Christ our suffering is not wasted, that we have there is redemptive suffering, and that he can turn all things for good, even the most tragic and traumatic. But would you I guess just come back a little bit, maybe those years? And I know in our Shalom series you did share, but some of the listeners might not be familiar with your story, but your family, and there was another family, and both of you are related. Would you take us back and just share a little bit more about that day and that story?
Yeah. So, obviously Danny and Layla are cousins of mine, and our girls love being together. Danny's daughter, Angelina, was a year older than Veronique. Veronique was 11 and Angelina was 12. And obviously there was Mabel, 13. The three girls really loved being together. And it was the 1st of February, and, I had said to my husband, look, it's Mabel's birthday. One of the girls that was, walking with them that survived, was her birthday. And we had another cousin of ours, Danny and Layla's cousin as well, who was having her 21st. And I said, look, it makes sense if I just dropped Veronique to be with Mabel and Angelina. And they were so excited about being together. It was just, they couldn't wait for the 1st of February. And then we'll head off to this party, and then I'll go back and pick her up. And so it was a very busy day that day. I was running around, and, Veronique, I said, do you want to stay here or sleep over or come back home or sleep over? She goes, no, I'll pack my bag, but maybe I'll come back home. So not a problem. We got there about 10 to 7. I told her to put her shoes on, or she had thongs on. So I said, put your shoes on. Veronique, put your sand shoes on. Knocked on the door. Danny answered, and I said, Danny, please make sure her mobile phone's charged instead of dying, because I need her to call me to tell me whether she wants to pick her up after the party. And he goes, has she eaten? I said, look, she can always eat. My daughter loves food. Anyway, dropped her off, then came back home. I met Craig at my place, and then we headed down to Surrey Hills to go to the 21st. Just parked the car, just got up the stairs to the venue, and then Danny rang. It's literally like maybe 5 to 8. And I thought, why is he calling me? They're meant to kind of be behind us. And he said to me, I've lost my children. And I said, oh, okay. I thought maybe they've gone for a run around the streets or... And he said that, I said, well, what do you mean, Danny? He goes, they're dead. Angelina, Auntie, and Sienna are dead. I don't know if I was standing after he said that or what happened. I just remember thinking, well, what about Veronique? I mean, do I ask about Veronique? I mean, imagine how selfish that would look if he's telling me his kids are dead, even though I couldn't even grasp what that meant. How do I ask about Veronique? Then I said, what about Veronique, Danny? And he goes, you just need to come to the golf course. So I must have, I don't know, I just remember Craig grabbing me and we just made it down the stairs into the car, and I was praying, Hail Mary, our Father, Hail Mary, our Father. Please don't let me, please don't let this happen. We called Danny a few times from the car. It's not good. Well, Danny, what do you mean? And, you just need to come here. Called my siblings, my sister and my brother, and when I got there, it was a crime scene. It was lights everywhere, people everywhere. We couldn't get in. There was like tapes. And I went up to the police officer and said, oh, my daughter's here, and they said, sorry, can't come in. This is not the way to come in. And we drove around, and I don't even remember how, but I do remember just sitting on the footpath, unable to get to Veronique. And everyone's just coming to me, and someone gave me a rosary beads in my hand, and I just clung onto the rosary beads and sat down at gutter. And that was it. I don't know, the night just went by, people coming and going, lights everywhere. And I realised, I don't know when during the night, that, Liana and Mabel were taken to hospital, and Charbel was in a coma, and Veronique was right on the footpath. She was right next to, she was a Sienna. So that, she swung 20 metres in the air into the golf course. So she was, they were all very badly, impacted. And the driver was drunk, on drugs, speeding 130 Ks in a 50 K zone. Got in the car knowing he was drunk and drugged. And he was going to an ATM to take out cash, probably to pay the dealer. So, or the person who gave him the drugs. So, Michael was still home. He had his first soccer game. So he said, Mum, is it okay if I stay home? He goes, Mum, I would love to go, but really it was like NPL, like league soccer. And he says, I don't want to be tired. So I thought, you know what, I'll get my girlfriend to check on him, because, I didn't want him to be tired. And I thought, I won't be long, like get home by midnight, the latest, by the time I go get Veronique. And, I didn't even kiss her goodbye. We were rushing, that life of rushing. Yeah. I didn't give her a kiss. I said, just put your shoes on, Veronique. I'll be back. And I thought, by the time I get home, by the time I get changed, go back down to the city, it was just a rush. And I've learned in life, you just got to stop and pause and say goodbye every time you see your children. And you get to drop them off to school or drop them anywhere. Goodbye, whatever you do when you depart from someone, hug them, kiss them, whatever it is, because you just don't know.
Yeah, gosh. It's such a huge thing that you've all been through. There's not even words for it.
I kept saying, Lord, have mercy on me. Lord, have mercy. Lord, like God, you're merciful, please, take this cup away from me, because it's too much.
Too much. Yeah. One of the most extraordinary things, Bridget, was, I guess, that in the days after the accident, and this is where I guess your story has become so public for people, was obviously because of the enormity of the tragedy and the number of people injured, that the news crew were there when you and the families went to visit the site. And it's particularly centered around the power of forgiveness and just the immediate response that happened that next day. Would you share a little bit about that?
Look, it's hard, it's hard. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you then, Karen. It's hard to explain how it actually, it's the Holy Spirit that talks and walks through your mind, your heart and your soul. For Layla to get in front of the media, and obviously I'm behind the scenes in the same way that she's on the media.
And Layla's the mum, just to clarify.
Layla is the mother of the 3 children, Anthony, Angela and Sienna, and we both lost half our families.
Yes.
When she says, I think I forgive, and I'm, in the same way, through the contemplation of, just forgiveness, because realize that Jesus is on the cross, and we're obviously going to go into Holy Week next week, and this goes to my relationship with the cross. It's incredibly, it changed incredibly after this tragedy, because I didn't quite understand what it meant to really suffer the way Jesus, and I probably haven't even suffered as much as Jesus suffered, humiliated, but him being in the worst time of his life, he was embarrassed, he was spat at, he was, even the way of dying on the cross is the most humiliating way to die. And then having his mother just watch that, I just thought, well, that's what Jesus wants of us. He wants us to forgive. He wants us to let it go. Because the only way to actually be with him one day and be with my daughter and reunite is to actually follow his path and walk your talk. I think God was sort of saying to me and to my family, like, the Our Father's there every day for you, and you say it, but do we really do what it says? And I was put to the test, if that makes sense. Like, like I felt like I can take any path here. I could take the anger and the hatred, or I can take what Jesus wanted us to do, love one another, do good for others and to forgive. And somehow you're washed with it, you're washed with this whole
the grace.
Spirit, the grace of God. And this is why I think God did choose our families. Because imagine if one of the families was angry and spiteful, what that would have done to us as families, to our grieving process, it's to our children. I look at my son, and he's full of love and respect, and there's no, sometimes I really got to think twice about the driver's name, because it's just not part of my thought process. And I think it's the grace of God, the Holy Spirit. And I do believe sometimes, we know the media, they never take a good story and really embellish it, but they did, because I think the Holy Spirit was even more powerful than the media. Like it was really, I think God had a message that he wanted to bring out. And, 4 children, someone recently only said to me 4, and there's 4 corners to the cross. Like there's a 4, cross is 4. And these children, why 4? And I really believe that there's a reason why. And from many levels, from 4 corners of the world, from families, together, how would they navigate through this? The power of a family unit and a community, in giving us together and grieving as a community, even though we grieve alone, and I do believe we heal together. It's all part of God's. I have to believe that God permitted this tragedy to happen for the greater good, and the greater good's coming out in so many ways.
Yes, it is. And I think, just because I'd love to talk about that, because when we hit a difficult season or hit trauma or tragedy and loss, such as you've experienced, I think a lot of people, they're just so in shock, and navigating through that can be so hard. But I know that you'd said to me in another conversation we'd had that you were able to make that decision because you'd sown so much into your faith over many years, and that prepared you for that moment.
Absolutely. It doesn't, you can't buy faith. Like you can't just purchase it off the shelf. It takes years it's a relationship that you have with Christ and with your community of faith. I feel like saying, coming from a finance corporate background, I say the bank of faith is paying its dividends. Does that make sense? Like it's almost like the building blocks of your mum and dad talking about Christ, reciting the Bible, verses in the Bible, going to church, the meaning of fasting, the meaning of Easter, the meaning of, forgiveness, the meaning of God's love, all comes back. And actually being in it, like living it, getting in the car with your children, and we would always pray, a decade on the way to school, but we'd offer it up to something, someone suffering, or, a homeless person, or whatever it is, someone sick. All that, for me, played a huge role in how I was going to cope with this. Like God was, the tapestry was being already weaved for him to prepare me for what was coming. And I would always pray the 7 Sorrows of Our Lady at least a year. My mum gave me a book of a woman who would come, to visit her. And she gave her the 7 Sorrows of Our Lady, and Mum said, here you go, read this, and every day I'd read it. Every day on the train, and I caught a train, I would read it. And I used to say, oh, Mother Mary, how could you have gone through all these, your sorrows? And I think even that was part of the preparation of your heart will be sorry. You will, go through the loss of a child, and it's all part of it.
Yeah, it is. I think as you're talking, one word or statement comes to mind. It's about stewardship. And I often hear people talking about stewarding the moments of our life well. And someone said to me, a couple of years ago when we were going through a difficult season, just with COVID and the impact that has for us, that you can suffer well. And she said, just suffer well, my friend, suffer well. And it hadn't occurred to me before that I could actually choose my response to my suffering, because so much of the time in life, it feels like we're a victim to the circumstances and things that are happening to us. But it's quite empowering in the sense, and not to take away from tragic circumstances, but it's just a reminder that we actually have that capacity to choose our response to suffering and to suffer well, to steward the moment so that we can grow, so that we can try and stay close to the Lord. And one of the fruits of that, which is clearly evident in your families, is just that then becomes a gift, that redemptive suffering, but that stewardship at the moment. And I think when we're faced with difficulty, whether it's through death and loss or other situations, just that we do have, I guess, the power to choose.
Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly right. And I was only talking to someone about this morning. You have a choice of which path you want to take. And that, that stewardship that you're talking about, and the redemptive suffering, it is a choice. Like we're born with free will, and we can choose. People always sort of blame God when things go wrong. But God didn't tell the driver to get in the car and get on 130 Ks and, take drugs and alcohol. That's not written anywhere in the Bible. It's not part of Christ's teaching. So we can't all blame God. We have to, for me, it's acceptance of what's happened. And absolutely the pain and suffering comes with that acceptance, but it's choosing, what am I going to do with this pain and suffering? How am I going to take it? And not to say that I struggle with sleep. I struggle with anxiety. Your whole being completely changes after you lose your flesh and blood. It's the worst kind, let alone tragically, over and above the loss of a child. It's how you lose that child as well. But I've chosen to, because my belief in knowing that there is eternity. Life is not just about now. This is temporary. So, for me, I made the choice to do great things, to honor her, to honor all of them, actually, all the 4 children. And in particular, for Veronique to be proud of me and what I'm going to do until I see her again. And, that includes all the stuff that I'm doing around the heartfelt platform, giving back through the cafe, and being a disciple of Christ and showing others that what forgiveness can do, and what loving Christ and the relationship you can have with Christ, what that can manifest into when something happens that you have no control over, and you have to surrender at times. This is too much for me, Jesus. Take this cup away from me. And I've learned, and I've realized that Jesus was human as well and divine, and he suffered. And no one's exempt from suffering. If God's only Son suffered, then who are we? Like, who am I? Like, I'm just like everyone else. And at times I say to myself, well, I'm not the first person to lose a child. Many people do, and as much as I can tap into those people to try and help those that are suffering and struggling, those that can't cope with their grief, because heartfelt is about, heartfelt community is about speaking grief, then I want to do that. Because one of the gifts and talents that God gave me is being able to connect with people and being able to talk to people and make people feel comfortable that they can be open about their feelings and to trust me.
Yes, because I think so much when we do go through suffering, regardless of how that comes into our life, it's a very isolating experience, isn't it? And sometimes there's not language for the suffering, and people who haven't walked that path, or perhaps they mean well, but there's people who fail us in our suffering, and so that can cause people, and I've seen this, to isolate more and more. And I just love what you're doing through Heartfelt, because and I also just love the way you're keeping, I guess, Veronique's spirit alive through her love of cooking, the cafe, but you're creating a place where people can come to take a photo and put it on that wall.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's just really, really beautiful, and such a powerful gift for those people who are suffering. And I'm interested, before, because I'd love to talk a little bit more about Heartfelt as well, and to promote that. But for people who are walking through grief, I mean, you're talking about it now, and obviously it's obvious that where you are today is not for lack of struggle and sadness and probably trying to get up out of bed each day. But what would you say to people who are in that position of early grief? What a help, because, you know, someone might look at you now and think, wow, like, you've come so far. I'm so far from that. Like, my whole body, like you said, it affects your body. I guess your experience, and that it is that roller coaster, isn't it?
Oh, it is, you know, like waves crashing, you know, like back and forth. It's like the seasons, you know, sometimes it's one day, 4 seasons. It's, you know, anything could trigger you, you know, like, even, you know, going to a girlfriend's daughter's wedding, you think, well, I'm not going to experience this. It could be anything. I find it hard to go into girls' stores that have kids for like teenagers or young girls, because I think, oh, I used to go in here all the time. I don't have anyone anymore to, you know, to even be excited about dressing, you know, your daughter. Like, I don't have a girl anymore. Like, does that make sense? I don't have that community of what a girl brings to a household, and the community that, you know, used to do the cooking, and she used to help me fold sheets, and she'd have her friends over and sleepovers, and, you know, that girly stuff's just gone. The whole community goes with the person, and not everyone's of faith. And sometimes I say to people, well, if I've got it wrong, so be it. I've been able to get up out of bed with my suffering and continue. And if I've got it wrong, I've got it wrong. But if I've got it right, wow, right? But I think what's key for anybody who's suffering, form of grief, loss of someone, any kind of grief, if you can have some accompaniment, have somebody, because that's what I got out of grief care, which are part of Catholic cemeteries and crematoria. They accompany families, you know, up until the funeral. Everyone's on adrenaline, everyone's coming to help you. What do you need? And then after that, it's like still waters, and you're sitting on that dinner table and there's a person missing. You're in the car and you're driving one to school and you don't get to drive the other one. You make one lunchbox and not the other one. It all changes. So accompanying someone, not being on your own, if you could just be able to connect in some way to someone or a community, as hard as it is, I encourage that, because that's what helped me. The accompaniment and the community around me helped me get up. My faith helped me get up. If you're of faith, you know, I really hope that you make the choice to lean on your faith. It doesn't matter what faith it is. And, you know, professional help, if you can, you know, our tragedy was so public, as you called out right at the beginning, Karen, but when it's not, you do suffer in silence, and there are so many people out there. But if you can also get some, you know, professional mental health help for your well-being, whatever that might be, it's very critical. And I know, you know, your mind, your body, your soul all needs to be nurtured.
And I'd also like to just call out people, you know, in the community, that if you do know somebody in your community who has been through loss or who's going through suffering, just to get around them. Because I know so many people, a friend of mine, you know, there was the anniversary that came around of her child for the 2nd year, and there was not that many people that made contact. And I just really want to encourage people. And the worst you can do, some people hold back because they don't want to upset or offend, whereas I've never been that kind of person. I'm always like, it's better to have said something and someone to say, oh, that's a bit much, than to have left that void for people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we don't speak grief. We live in a society, it's countercultural to speak grief. It's countercultural to cry. If you cry, you say sorry. If you laugh, it's okay. And it's not really okay. They're all both emotions. And I you know, sometimes I that's what I feel like my path is in life, to be that sort of wounded healer, to call people who don't have anyone to speak to them, or they need a phone call from someone who's gone through what they've gone through, and I know how you feel, or I've been through what you've been through, maybe a little bit different, but I can appreciate your pain. I like to do that, and I always look out for quite a few people lost children last year that I was aware of, and I'd always find a way to get their phone number and to call them. And sometimes I've had they've just shut down completely. They don't want to see anyone, and that's fine. But I do recommend that you try not to do that, because it just manifests into all sorts of other things that are long-term and damaging, as opposed to at least having someone just reach out to you.
Absolutely.
But others welcome the visit. They welcome the phone call. And that's what Heartfelt does. It brings that community together. And I feel like by creating Heartfelt, leading it, it has such a purpose in life, because nobody's exempt from suffering. And the price you pay for loving someone is grief. It will be. We all will go through grief in our life. Yeah. We'll all lose someone one day that we love and we love dearly. And what a way to prepare ourselves if we can be around people who can catch us.
I know back many years ago now, I worked as an oncology palliative care nurse at St. George Hospital in Kogarah, and it was honestly one of the most sacred. I think having my children was very sacred, but walking someone home to heaven's door was such a sacred experience. And we were really blessed that a lot of the nurses on our ward were Christian. And there was a book we read called May I Walk You Home, and there was another one that had the picture of the Pieta on the front, and that's Mary holding Jesus.
Jesus, yeah.
And the whole theory that we started to adopt in our nursing was this, that when someone's life feels like it's being blown apart by grief and tragedy, that just to get around them and to hold them, whether that's a physical embrace or just a note. But as nurses, we would often bring two beds together, and people who had no one in their final moments, we'd do things like get up on their bed and just hold them.
That's beautiful.
It really was really sacred that you just, I don't know, as people, if we're carrying Christ's image with us, that we're called to bring him to the people that we meet and the people we encounter. And I think we have a fear around grief in our culture. In the Western world, we have a fear. It makes us people incredibly uncomfortable. And I've seen it up close, friends that have lost children, that just get in people's space. Don't be afraid. I would like to say to all women listening to this, that just think right now on this podcast, as you're listening to this podcast, about someone, whether they've lost someone or not, or someone just going through a difficult time. We get caught up in our own busyness, but we forget what just a little note or a text or a call or post a letter or offering of babysitting or a visit can do.
Just goes a long way. Yeah. So many people do suffer in silence, and I think as humans we try, and sometimes, like I remember once I was coming out of the doctor's surgery. I was in the city, and I saw someone that I'd known for a long time. It was the CEO of a bank, actually. And when he saw me kind of hit behind the pole, I don't know if I've told you the story.
No.
I went, oh dear. So I walked around and I said, oh, such and such, why are you hiding behind the pole? Because I just don't know what to say to you. I just don't know what to say to you. I said, well, you can give me a hug. Let's start there. And that's the thing. A lot of people, don't know what to say to you. Or if they do, they go, I don't mean to upset you. It's like, for me, it's like, well, my daughter lived this earth. Why are we afraid to mention her name? And I think it's about not wanting to hurt me or remind me of the pain. But you're always in that pain. You live in pain. That pain is constant. It's your gut always feels not right, but you've made a choice to get up and do things. And whether you mention her name or you don't, it's actually, I find it harder when you don't, because I know it's the elephant in the room. Why aren't you mentioning my daughter's name? And I think if we speak about our loved ones, and we can change the culture of the Western world, especially, that's the whole thing about Heartfelt. It's about honouring your loved one, talking about your loved one. And, there's no advice or counselling or judgment. It's just you're around people at the moment getting a community of faith in the presence of one another in your own home on a Monday night. And it's being able to talk about that person that you love so much.
Yeah. And your daughter was so beautiful. She just radiated
Yeah.
joy, didn't she? She's just
She
absolutely
was, yeah, full of life. She was stoic. She loved people. She was not attached to anything material. And I say that because she never opened up a present. She didn't really, was always around being with people, cooking, animals. She loved dogs. She was witty. She had a great sense of humor. She could read between the lines. And every day, I know, I feel there's such a, something huge is missing in my life every day. And my son, he feels it as my son, and my husband feels it as my husband, but no one's going to fill Veronique's shoes. And like I said, I feel like my hole is so deep because of the fact that I don't have that girl anymore in the house. And I don't know what girls her age love and like doing. So I know I'm missing something, but, the other beauty is that her friends invite me to their daughters' birthdays. And I'm still connected to the school, and the fact that I've got that connection, and I can go to their birthday parties, as much as it's a punch in your gut watching, like going, wow, I'm here, wow, like, but my daughter's missing, or she's not here. She's actually spiritually here. What would she look like? And I ask them all the time, and they go, well, Veronique would look like this, she'd be wearing this and have her hair like this. And for Veronique's birthday, I had all her friends from school at the cafe. We had a morning tea because I want to see them grow. I want to be part of their life. I don't want Veronique to be a distant memory. I want her to be part of their, we're going to go to Veronique's birthday again this year, even though she's not here physically. So I'm trying to create a culture that your spirit lives on. Don't shut it down. And, that's what Heartfelt's about. It's about bringing people together. Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit more about how people might get involved, how they might receive support? Is that purely a Sydney-based thing, or is that
no? It's actually it's online. I've got a website, heartfelt.community, and you go on and it sort of there's a button where you can get started, and it'll ask you a few questions, and then your details come to me via email. And I'll pick up the phone and I'll call and just try and understand, your story. And if I can't help in any way, then I always connect with grief care because I've got professional. Yes. I live grief, and my experience is what I try and do to help others. But they're professional experts in the grief space, so if I think it's too much, and as in for them, and then I explain what we do. And basically every Monday night, there's 150 people in the community now, but every Monday night, there's a theme. So at the moment, it's faith-based. It follows the Catholic calendar at the moment. But I want to grow it that we have a night where for people who don't have a denomination. But if you are of faith, you're of Christian faith, you come on. And at the moment, obviously, it's the journey through Lent. So every week there's a theme. And the theme is broken up. We break open that theme through scripture. So last week it was about, obviously, Lazarus arising. And what does that mean? And Jesus cried. He grieved, and I broke open for a reflection, and then we have a bit of a video, 2-3 minute video. I do leverage resources from grief care. And then I'll pick a few questions, and we have the breakout rooms for about 20-25 minutes, 4 to 5 people in a room, and talk those questions. And people have got to know each other really well. Now, it's been going for 2.5 years, and people come on at different times of their grief journey, and they leave. They're not there for 2.5 years. They'll come on for 6 months. They might come on for a month. They might come on for 2 years. But it is a good community. And then we have a blessing, and then we have a song. It goes for an hour. I've got everyone that comes on, I get their permission to get their mobile number so that, we put it on, I put it on a WhatsApp group, and every week I tell them the theme of the following week. And, people love it. They just love being in their own home, in their own space. It's meditative. So I get them in a state of prayer. We do meditation. We've got a feelings wheel. You're allowed to, if you'd like to explain the couple of words how you're feeling. And Michael, who's a colleague of mine, who I met, after Veronique's death, who runs the cafe, is a partner in our cafe as well. He does all the presentations and slides. Grief Care supports me with content. And every week there's a beautiful, beautiful program. I had a spiritual director on there who used to dial in from Rome and then the UK, a lovely priest, Father Dominic Jenkinson, and his cousin is a family educator in Sydney.
Oh, there you go.
She used to be Veronique's at Veronique's school, and he's been a bit busy, but I do want to connect with another priest. But it's absolutely beautiful.
That's amazing, Bridget.
And I think we've had people who've lost their children. We've had people, mothers, there's 3 or 4 that come on. Others lost their husbands at a young age. Parents. We've got someone who anticipates losing his mother. She's in her late 90s. We've got people with special needs that come on, ages from 18 up. And I just, and so the tagline, if you go on the website, heartfelt.community, is because love lives on. And that's what we have on the wall in the cafe. So it's all interconnected about honoring your loved one and making sure that people feel they can talk about their loved one. It's not a burden on anyone. So it goes kind of 2 ways. People might go, well, I can't, talk about my, such and such. What I've struggled with is, I used to always say to people, well, how many kids do you have? And now when someone asks me, I kind of go, well, I've got 2, but I explain one's in heaven, one's on earth. Or, sometimes that's the part where I struggle where, telling your story or introducing yourself and, people go, I'm a mother of this. And I start, that's the part where I go, okay, well, I'm going to talk now. And it's a hard conversation. It pains me every time I talk about how many kids I've got because one's not with me, but she's doing so much great work from above, and she's very proud of what we're doing. And the day we actually had family and friends come for the opening of the cafe, which was the 8th of July last year, a photo popped up on my mobile phone of her. She just cooked a meal for everyone, and it was the table was full of stuff. So I framed that photo, and it's on top of the kitchen in the cafe. And that's she was telling me, Mum, I'm really happy, I'm proud, and this is great.
Fantastic, Bridget. Honestly, I just want to really thank you for your witness and the way that you have walked this journey. I know it's not without its struggles still. It's still immensely painful, immensely difficult, but it really is a gift. And the number of people that have emailed me from the Shalom Real Women series just wanting to say thank you to you, because for them, just to see someone that's actually walked that journey and been able to do it. And we hold that struggle alongside walking it with God's grace, and it's not to negate the struggle, but it's to walk with Christ and to pick up our cross and carry it with his grace. And that's what you've done.
And let's not forget his beautiful mother who watched him suffer and carried herself with dignity and love. And probably after the shock of it all and watching her son, she had to round up the troops, the disciples and apostles, and probably hold them together. And, just imagine her dead son in her arms. Oh, can you think of the pain? But she got up and she kept going because she trusted and she believed. And I trust and I believe. And, I think someone said to me, one of your family members sort of saying, well, how do you get up and smile and, still do this and that? It's like, but this is all temporary. This is, there's a greater good out there, and there is heaven, and I will see her again. So why wouldn't I want to make her proud and make God proud? Because that's what he wants. He wants love. He wants forgiveness. He wants hope. We live in that's what Easter's about.
Yes, it is.
The cross is about. Cross is about. Without the cross, I would never have seen Veronique again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Bridget, thank you so much. You're truly inspiring, and your story, thank you for your vulnerability, and thank you for gifting people with your story, because it's not easy to suffer publicly. It's not easy to walk that journey, but the number of people that you've touched and the number of people you're helping, I just really want to give thanks to you for your yes to God. So
thank you for wanting to share the story and to be interested in it. And it's you're part of it because you want to get the message out there, and that's how God works.
Yes, he does. Well, God bless you and your family.
God bless you. Have a lovely weekend too.
What a sacred conversation. I don't know about you, but I just feel so convicted about the role that my faith plays in my life and how I'm living that out, but particularly in this area of forgiveness and how I would respond if I was in the same shoes. I guess it just begs the question of, are we sowing every day into our faith journey? Are we cultivating that rich soil of our soul that would enable us to forgive somebody if such a thing happened to us? Once again, I just really would like to affirm Bridget and her family and their yes to the Lord, their yes to forgiveness, because this is such a gift in the lives of so many people who bear witness to it. Ladies, if you are experiencing grief and loss, or you know of others who are walking that similar journey, can I encourage you to get connected with Bridget's community? You can find that online, and I do really encourage you to check it out. One of the gifts of technology is that we can support people who are living remotely. So I really want to encourage you to connect with that community or another grief and loss community to help navigate through that journey. Until next week, ladies, have a beautiful week and God bless you.